When we were in high school, his grandmother became ill, and she was staying at Ella Springer's house because everything was all on one floor. And my girlfriend and I walked past Ella's house on our way home. We lived on Pearl Street. And there was a shiny Buick out in front of Ella's home with a black chauffeur in the front. So we knew that Mr. Jackson must be visiting his mother. And I guess that was so. He used to stay in Hotel Jamestown when it was still in business. He and Mrs. Jackson came to the rehearsal dinner. It was at some tea room on Fairmont Avenue, and it was Old Home Week in Frewsburg. The firemen have a carnival every year. And so my father had to have places reserved near the church for parking. So when Jacksons came into town, they were stopped by the police and asked were they going to the wedding or the carnival. And I believe Uncle Bob said we were going to the wedding. Perhaps we'd come to the carnival later. I don't believe they did. And then we went on down to Washington, and we stayed at Hickory Hill with them. And they had a cute dachshund named Schatzi, which means treasure in German. And he was going to go fishing. So I believe it was the day after we arrived. We went into the court. He drove his car, and we came behind. The parking was under the court, and Harold was allowed to leave his little Plymouth there, along with the other cars. And we went up, and he showed us around his office. Morning after we got to Hickory Hill, and Irene said at breakfast she never had so much fun in her life as she did the night before. He had played cards at the White House and come home with his pocket stuffed full of money. And she had fun counting his money. Well, he looked distinguished, and people would turn and look at him, you know, when he was in public. And I always thought he was taller than he was, I guess.
How tall was he? Was he about Harold's height?
No, he wasn't as tall as Harold. He was about the same size as Harold's father. We were there after his first heart attack. And at breakfast he said, the doctor said I shouldn't eat eggs, but I've had them all my life. I'm not going to stop now. So he had eggs for breakfast.
Do you recall much about the funeral itself of Justice Jackson?
Yes. I remember that we family members were in the, I guess, a chapel at first. And the family came in. I don't believe Tommy and Bobby were along. And
this would have been the chapel at St. Luke's.
St. Luke's. And Governor Dewey was introduced to Aunt Irene. He was a short man.
Was he?
He was, I believe, shorter than she was. And the church was packed. The casket had one rose on. I forget who it was given by. A peace rose.
Was the casket open or closed?
Closed.
Closed? And was that by Irene's desire, or?
I think the church.
Right.
It's their custom. Oh, there had been a funeral at the National Cathedral too.
Right.
And my mother-in-law didn't want TV on at all. So we never saw that. But my parents saw it at their house.
Mm-hmm.
It was wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And then all the justices came to Jamestown.
They came by train and made me think of Abraham Lincoln. Aunt Irene said in the night she didn't sleep. There were people standing by the railroad, you know, tipping their hats in the night,
Right.
all night long, as they came to Jamestown. And there was such a long procession to Frewsburg, my goodness. There were people everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we rode in Frank Taylor's mother's car.
Was there much of an internment service there, do you recall?
No, just the usual.
Mm-hmm.
Only there were chairs for the women.
Helen and Ella and Irene and Mary
And me.
and you.
We all sat down.
Okay. Then after the internment, where did the family go?
Back to my mother-in-law's house, and she and a friend of hers had everybody there, you know, all the family. And Irene's sister was there also. Elizabeth was her name, Elizabeth Gerhardt.
Jackson, he had a heart attack that spring. Were they really worried about him?
As I think my mother-in-law was.
Yeah.
And he liked greens to eat. And she fixed him cowslip greens and sent them to Washington. And someone took him to the hospital for him to eat.
Mm-hmm.
I think dealing with the Russians about procedures for the trial did a lot to damage him physically.
It's very clear to us at the Jackson Center that Harold had a very close relationship with Robert Jackson.
He did.
And
He taught him to ride and gave him a pony, which was kept at his Uncle Harry Adams' farm.
what was the pony's name?
Buster.
Buster?
And when Mary and Bodie would go to Spring Creek to their place, they rented horses to ride.
Right.
And one was named Willoughby, I think, and Harold rode that one time.
Were you a horseback rider also?
No,
No? They couldn't get you to do that?
no. Our girls used to ride
Did they?
some, yeah.
Yep. And I thank you for all of your time, and we'll do this again.
Well, thank you.